The Little Red-Headed Princess. Who ever heard tell of a red-headed princess? Of course, you never did. You can search your fairy books through and through, and never once will you find tell of a red-headed princess. For there never was one in song or story till once upon a time. And that's where our story begins. Once upon a time, there was a red-headed princess, a little princess whose hair was as red as fire or carrots or, well, any of the things we think of when we see a red head. Oh, there couldn't be any mistake about its redness. Now, as I've already said, such a thing had never been heard tell of before. In all the kingdom there had never been a red-headed princess. As far back as the very oldest folk could remember, there had never been a red-headed princess. Until, of course, once upon a time. "Oh, how very nice!" laughed the Lady Queen, stroking the baby head that was already covered with soft, very red down. "How extraordinary!" quoth the Daddy King, tilting his crown at a puzzled angle. The court sages put their wise old heads together and rubbed their chins. Her Royal Highness would outgrow it, they said. They meant, of course, the red hair. There never was and never could be a red-headed princess that might some day be a red-headed queen. It wasn't to be thought of. Oh, most certainly her Royal Highness would outgrow it. Then the court sages put their solemn heads together and rubbed their chins harder and croaked, "Indubitably, yes, quite indubitably." The ladies-in-waiting held their sides with laughing. "Cunning little redhead," they tittered, peeping into the royal cradle. Far and wide, near and far, all over the kingdom went the court criers, crying loudly, shouting gaily, "Hear ye! Hear ye! Born today, 1st of May, a princess fair who has red hair. By royal decree. Hear ye! Hear ye!" A princess with red hair! In spite of the wonder of it, it tickled the fancies of the good folk. Just fancy, they mused before their fires in the chilly evenings. Many a good wife scurried home to sew white ribbons in place of the pink or blue in her gifts for the teeny new princess. For even a red-headed princess cannot wear pink or blue. In the meantime, the little princess lay in the royal cradle and played with her royal toes. She delighted in pulling her old nurse's nose. And all the time she was red-headed. She wasn't outgrowing it, and she didn't mind. The very red down in due time grew into very red ringlets, still very red. And later on there were 2 bobbing pigtails, and later on the pigtails were 2 braids that hung over her shoulders, long and shining and red. The little princess's eyes were like pansies, the brown kind, and her voice made you think of little brooks lipping through ferny places. And everybody loved her. So what difference did it make whether her hair was black or brown or flaxen or red? In fact, everybody was beginning to forget that a red-headed princess was a curious thing. That is, everybody but the court sages. They still believed she'd outgrow it. But as for the little princess herself, she had never minded anyway. Now at her christening, she was given a wondrously beautiful name. They thought it would make up for the red hair, I suppose. They gave her a name that sounded like all the music of the world singing together, harps and winds in treetops and seashells. And her name was Charmian. Such a name would have made any little girl happy, just any ordinary, everyday little girl, to say nothing of a princess. For remember that Charmian had the fun of being a princess. Time went along, as time does. Everything in the kingdom was as fit as a fiddle. And then something happened. Oh, quite suddenly. The little princess began minding. That is, about being red-headed. And this is how it happened. In the garden, one morning, Charmian was tossing her golden ball. Suddenly a voice called, "Redhead, redhead, redhead!" Little Princess cocked one ear. A queer piping voice it was. It seemed to come from just no place at all. A moment, then it came again. "Redhead, redhead, redhead!" Little Princess cocked 2 ears. Such a queer little voice. It sounded like nothing so much as the creaking of a rusty hinge. And such a queer thing for the voice to be calling for. You understand, as far as Charmian knew, red hair was quite the popular color for the head of a little princess to be. She only wondered a little as she hunted about the garden. High and low, here and there she hunted, but neither sight did she see nor sound did she hear. So up went the golden ball once more. Up and down, like sunshine flickering. Again and again went the golden ball. All at once it started again. Only this time it went, "Redhead, redhead, reddy, redhead, redhead, red as can be." And there on the wall, as plain as day, sat a dwarf. He was rocking himself to and fro, his arms twisted 3 times round his hunched knees. So little and brown and wizened was he might have been a leaf. And there he sat, rocking and screwing his face into naughty knots. But worst of all was the squeaking for all the world like a rusty hinge. "Redhead, redhead, red as can be, redhead, redhead." Right then, the little princess began minding so hard that her sobs filled the palace garden and brought her old nurse running. They brought the daddy king and the lady queen running. The palace guards came running. Indeed, the court sages themselves came running. But when the old nurse, the lady queen, and the daddy king and all the others got there, the dwarf was gone. Clean gone. Disappeared. Snuffed out like a candle. There was only little Princess Charmian, wringing her hands, minding for the first time that she was red-headed. Oh, oh, what a to-do there was, now that the little princess minded, and oh, how she minded! She sobbed that she didn't want red hair. She went whole puddles of tears. She yanked at her pigtails till her foolish little head ached, and somehow or other, curiously enough, those pigtails seemed redder than ever. So there seemed only one thing for the little princess to do. She sobbed and sobbed. In spite of everything she did or said, she went on sobbing and sobbing. Oh, how the lady queen wrung her hands in despair. The daddy king was quite beside himself. He loved little princess so much that he would gladly have given up half his kingdom, I believe, to keep her from dropping a tear. The court sages, so wondrous wise, you remember, said her royal highness would get over it. I don't just know whether they meant her red hair or sorrow. Anyway, they rubbed their chins and said, "Indubitably, indubitably." Hours and days and weeks passed, but Charmian wasn't getting over it. The daddy king, distracted, sent his court criers throughout the length and breadth of the land, proclaiming,
"Hear ye! Hear ye! Be it known that whoever helps her highness, the Princess Charmian, in her plight, shall fill his hat with pearls from the king's pillory."
far and wide, near and far, all over the kingdom again went the court criers, and at their heels came those who sought to help the distressed princess, and help themselves to the pearls into the bargain. From far and wide, near and far they came. Rich men, poor men, beggar men, chiefs, doctors, lawyers, merchants, priests poured into the palace. Each brought an idea for solving the problem of the little princess's red hair. One offered a comb that was supposed to comb away the redness. Alas, it only succeeded in snarling her hair, as well as her temper, into a sorry state. Another had curl papers. Magique, he said they were. For days the little princess's hair went about screwed into 24 knots, but the 24 knots unscrewed into 24 kinks, red kinks, mind you. One valiant fellow from the farthermost corner of the land had a powder. Her highness had only to dissolve it in water, dip her head into it, and lo, her hair would become as black as cinders that the flame has left. But, although the directions were carefully followed, Charmian's hair was dyed a most brilliant purple. Thereupon that valiant fellow was soaked overnight in a vat of his own medicine, and it was only after 13 vigorous scrubbings with yellow soap that the little princess's hair was red once more. Still the people with ideas poured into the palace. At first the little princess had everything tried. Her poor little head was frizzled till it sizzled, was bleached till she screeched. Now it was coming May Day. May Day was Princess Charmian's birthday, if you remember, so, of course, it was the great day of days in the kingdom. But unless something happened very soon, it looked as though the little princess would spend this birthday in tears. For red hair was, and red it always would be, it seemed. Things were beginning to look hopeless. And then it was May Day. Other May days the good folk had banners, bands, and bonfires higher than haystacks. Nobody felt like rejoicing this year. Certainly the little princess didn't rejoice. The truth was she was making herself ill with weeping. And the Daddy King, at his wit's end, nagged and wagged his poor head till his crown toppled. And all the time it was May Day. There was blue sky with Lambton clouds dancing on it. There was new green grass thrown over the fields and byways like scarves, all dotted with pinky blossoms. Down the road this May Day came an old man. He wore a long green cloak, as green as the pine woods it was, and the buckles on his shoes flashed in the sunshine. His hat was rather too large for his head, and upon it was a feather that curled about the brim and off, in a grand sweep. The face underneath his hat reminded you of something withered and dried up. A winter apple, maybe, or, better still, a seed. And oh, the pack on his back! 'Twas a pack of patches, I declare. Sky-blue patches and orange patches and purple patches, checked patches, green patches, polka-dot patches, all jumbled together. Such a bundle could hold only the jolliest secrets, you somehow felt sure. The back under this pack was bent, but the man's step was light and quick, and as he swung along he sang,
For I am Mr. Pocket, sing full de row, sing hey. My sturdy pack's upon my back, I'll travel far today.
All this he sang to a queer, funny, high little tune that, if you'd heard it, you'd sing in your mind for days after. Down the hill into the village he came, his buckles flashing, his feather waving. Dogs that came out to bark sniffed and nuzzled against the green cloak. As the high little tune went up the street, mothers, tired with waiting on little ones, began humming. Little hands waved here and there, from a wall, from a gate, and a flock of birds swept down to circle about his head. They flew on, soaring back, once or twice, to cluster about him lovingly. On and on he went, stepping in time to his song. Now he was on the high road. At the crest of the road stood the palace. Its turrets sparkled in the May Day sunshine. Through the great outer gates of the palace went the little old man, right past the astonished guards without so much as ask by your leave. Through the great inner gates and through goodness knows how many gardens and courtyards and royal chambers and winding corridors he went, his heels making a pleasant clickety-click-click. Into the princess's own chamber he marched, Such a sorry sight was this for a May day. Here sat the little red-headed princess sniffling, and snuffing smelling salts between sniffles. Here was the lady queen who had not left off wringing her hands since she had started. Here was the daddy king with his crown set crookedly, and he didn't care. Here were the ladies in waiting, poor dears, looking as dismal as a month of rainy Sundays. And here was Mr. Pocket sweeping off his hat and saying brightly,
"Hi-ho! Here I am!"
He said it just as though they had been waiting for him. 'Twas most curious. Everyone seemed to forget that a body didn't speak to kings and queens and princesses that way. For such a long while everyone had thought only of the princess's red hair that they had completely got out of the habit of thinking of anything else. Now everybody dabbed his or her eyes and stared at the bent little figure with his pine-green cloak and fascinating pack.
"Hey-ho!"
said Mr. Pocket again, bowing double.
"Here I am to cure the little princess all of her woes." "See that you do,"
growled the king.
"The worse for you if you fail."
And I'm afraid he meant it. But, wonder of wonders, the little princess had stopped crying. Her face was all swollen and red, but she wasn't crying. "Oh," she said, clasping her hands, "just make me happy again." And all this she said without so much as one sob in her voice. The little old man was already fumbling in that curious bundle of rainbow patches. When he bobbed up, he brought a long roll of paper. He set himself on a little tuffet. Had that come out of the pack, too, the little princess wondered. And now he unwound the roll, and with his legs crossed he began reading. The king's mouth fell open in amazement. A fine way indeed to cure his little princess of red hair. He was just about to order the old fellow out of his kingdom when he caught sight of the little princess's face. Why, only a little while ago it had been swollen and red, and here she was, as fresh as a daisy, listening with every bit of her. The daddy king cocked his ear, and in a trice he was listening, not only with his ears, but with every bit of him. For the little man was reading a wondrous story. It was all about a little maiden who was so kind-hearted that the fairies spun her a gift of hair. Spider webs and thistledown they gathered, golden pollen from the flowers, and even handfuls of stardust. Their spinning wheels whirred many days. When they finished, 'twas found they had made stuff that had never been seen before on land or sea. Long, soft curls of hair they had woven, and lo, 'twas red as tassels of corn silk. The fairies were so delighted with the little maiden and her lovely hair that they made her their queen. She rode in a coach drawn by butterflies. In the moonlight she danced, and her shining hair was a sight to behold. The queen of the fairies was kept busy being godmother to little prince and princess babies. She always had a gift for every one of them. Sometimes 'twould be the gift of a kind heart, or sometimes sunny smiles. Sometimes, for some good reason, mind you, large ears. Now there was one gift the fairy queen gave only once in a great while. To her favorite godchild would she give the wondrous gift of red hair. Suddenly, Princess Charmian cried, "Oh, oh, oh!" She was looking down at her long braids as if she had never seen them before. "Why," she said, "the fairy godmother gave me the gift of red hair. How lovely!"
Aha! You've guessed the secret,
chuckled the little pocket, rolling up his story. Then such a hubbub. "You must be her favorite godchild," the Lady Queen cried between smiles and tears. The ladies in waiting tittered excitedly.
Well, that's extraordinary, very extraordinary,
boomed the Daddy King. "Indubitably, indubitably," croaked the court sages, rubbing their chins and trying to look wise. Just then Charmian thought of the little old man. But bless me, he wasn't to be found. When he had gone, or where he had gone, nobody could tell. But gone he was. A guard said something about seeing a green cloak disappear round a corner. If it had been found that he had vanished like the dwarf, 'twould have been no surprise, for 'twas declared that anybody that could cure the little princess in this way could do anything, just anything. But the pearls. What about the pearls? He didn't wait for the pearls, said everybody to everybody else at the same time. And I never even thanked him, mourned the little princess, who had a kind heart. But the next moment she was happy again. In fact, if the truth be known, she was happy ever after. Straightway the kingdom began to celebrate May Day, with banners, bands, and bonfires, in quite the good old way. The old nurse brushed little Princess's hair till it shone like silk. As for Charmian herself, she smiled in the looking-glass, because she had red hair. Please like and subscribe to Old Shelves.